the Hand of the Lord International Church, where we are dedicated to equipping you with sound doctrine, nurturing you as a disciple, and fostering meaningful connections within our community of believers. Stay tuned as we grow together in faith. This is a Sound Doctrine broadcast.
Evening's Bible study session. So we're going to open up in prayer before we get started. So, Father God, we thank you for this opportunity that we're able to come together and learn about this topic, and of course, see you in this topic, God. We pray for open hearts and open minds, open eyes to see the knowledge that people need to know. We pray that your word will come across the sanctuary clearly. It will bring illumination to us. We will increase our faith in you and increase our knowledge in this area. In Jesus' name, amen. Okay, first I want to thank Pastor Shelley and Lady Shelley for giving me this opportunity to talk to you all this evening about this topic. So today we're talking about growing your own vegetables, and the title is Growing Your Own Food Makes Sense. So on this first title slide, you can see, all these beautiful vegetables here. Hopefully at the end of this, at some point, you will hopefully create that abundance at your home, at your farm, at your residence. Because at the end of the day, whatever you can produce is going to be, sustenance to your body and to your family's body. So on this next slide here, we have a picture. This picture is from 2020. So what happened during 2020? COVID, right? So, people were hoarding toilet paper out of all things, right? But also there were different disruptions to the food chain. So this is a picture showing a bunch of empty shelves. So I put this picture here to get y'all to think about these things. So back in the day, right, we didn't have Kroger and Walmart and DoorDash, Uber Eats, McDonald's. People, if you wanted to eat, it was something you grew on the farm. You had to kill a chicken, kill a cow, whatever. So right now we have just super high dependence on other people providing resources to us. So growing your own food is one way that you can kind of lower that dependence and give yourself more power in that area. So growing your own food makes sense, but it also gives you security. So in 2 Timothy 1:7, it says, "For God has not given us the spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of a sound mind." So, COVID, there was, of course, a lot of fear and confusion during that time. But also, I don't want you all to panic and think, you got to go spend $1,000 on canned goods or whatever, right? So, reality of the situation is, we'll think about that ice storm that just happened, I think, in January. They said ice was coming to Atlanta. People ran to Walmart. They buying 10 jugs of milk and the whole meat section, all that. So naturally, we're reacting to something that could happen. But in reality, you need to just prepare with a sound mind. So in 2 Timothy 1:7, a sound mind basically means a self-controlled mind. So in contrast to panic and confusion that ensues when people, aren't prepared. So don't be scared, just be prepared for emergencies or situations. So another thing, so we talked about COVID. So there's also a lot of things in the news about outbreaks with E. coli, salmonella. So as soon as that happens, they say, pull the lettuce off the shelves, pull X product off the shelf. So that's another, direct impact on our food and your access to food. And then, of course, there's higher grocery prices. And then, if you look around the globe, everything that's going on in different countries, how that affects trucking, ships coming to port, supply chains. So reality of the situation, there's just a ton of things going on that affect, that delicate kind of connection we have with depending on grocery stores for food. So in addition to security, back to the topic at hand, growing your own food does save you money. So this is a quote from the National Gardening Association that basically estimates that growing, a well-established vegetable garden can save you up to $500 a year. So of course that's gonna vary depending on, someone who has a 1 acre vegetable garden versus someone who has, one tomato in a pot, right? So the savings are gonna vary based on the scale of your operation. So I would say anytime you get started with something, the startup cost is going to be the highest point. So I've had a vegetable garden for, I don't know, at least probably, well, I think we started in 2020. So about 6-7 years I've had a vegetable garden. So my vegetable garden is established. So it's easier for me to grow different crops, and it's also cheaper for me to start vegetable gardening. I already have a foundation in place that allows me to start growing vegetables. So for you, if you're starting up, higher costs are going to be things like you're going to have to buy soil, fertilizer, plant seeds. Are you going to grow in raised beds? Are you going to grow in pots? Do you have to clear some trees or something on your property? So all those things, of course, are going to cost money initially, but once you establish your growing area year after year after year, you're not going to have to buy as much because you already have that area set up for success. So these next few slides, they're going to show different crops. So I can't list all the crops that we eat, so I just kind of listed the most popular ones that most people can relate to. But before we get into that, I wanted to ask, does anyone know what organic produce is? Like, what does organic mean? Without pesticides? Okay, someone else? Fresh, natural? Not genetically modified. Okay, so a really important, thing to think about with saving money on food is food labels. So I put ranges here for each of the crops. So like tomatoes, they're going to range from $2 to $4 a pound. But when you're looking at things like, should I buy an organic tomato or a non-organic tomato? This is the thing. So organic means that crop was raised in a certain way. So, in America, you'll often see USDA organic. You'll see that little green and white label. So that doesn't mean no pesticides were used. So within the USDA organic label, basically it's a label or a certification that the USDA gives to farmers, and it tells them these are the things you can do to raise crops, and these are the rules you have to follow. So there's a list of different chemicals they can use on their farms that are considered organic chemicals. So it doesn't mean, they didn't use any chemicals. It means they use a certain group of chemicals that are labeled organic. So that's not a knock on the organic farmers. That's just a different way of growing. But generally speaking, it focuses on growing things more naturally with less pesticides. And we'll talk about how that works later. But so let's look at tomatoes. So tomatoes is the first crop. And I base these prices off things like Walmart, Kroger, Publix, places most people shop at around here. So a tomato, to buy 1 pound, is roughly going to be $2 to $4 a pound. So that's going to vary depending on, are you buying a small pack of tomatoes, a big pack of tomatoes, organic, non-organic. So if we look at growing our own tomato plant, so we'll pick cherry tomatoes. So I like cherry tomatoes. I like to make salsa with those, put them in salads. Those are pretty common. So one cherry tomato plant can grow between 100 and 300 cherry tomatoes. So it can produce that amount of tomatoes. So, in a perfect world, we'll say you get a tomato plant from the store. It gives you 300 tomatoes over the season. And so there's roughly 30 tomatoes in 1 pound. And we'll say, $3 a pound for a tomato. So if you multiply $3 times 10 pounds, which would be equivalent to 300 tomatoes, you get $30. So you may be saying $30. That's not necessarily a lot, but if you're buying cherry tomatoes 3-4 times a month every month throughout the year, you know, you can do the math on that, right? So that's a cost you can save. So next we have peppers. So peppers roughly are going to be $2 to $7 a pound. You know, you got bell peppers, sweet peppers, hot peppers. I like hot peppers. I like spicy stuff. So I'm probably not going to grow bell peppers personally because they just don't taste that good to me. But my example for growing peppers is a jalapeno plant. So one jalapeno plant can produce about 30 to 40 jalapenos. So if we look at the math, about 20 jalapenos equals 1 pound. We'll say $2 a pound on the jalapenos. So if we produce 10 pounds of jalapenos off a few plants, multiplied by $2, that's $20 of jalapenos. So you may not like a lot of spicy stuff. You can insert a bell pepper in that example. If you buy bell peppers, you know, 10 times a year, and you have your own bell pepper plant, that's another savings for you again. So then we have cucumbers. So cucumbers are going to be about $1 to $3 a pound. And the varieties of cucumbers, I mean, you're not going to see that much in the store. But one cucumber plant, one regular cucumber plant can produce about 10 to 30 cucumbers. So again, we'll break it down. 2 large cucumbers equal about 1 pound. You can do $1 a pound times 10 pounds, which is about 20 cucumbers. That equals $10. So as you can see, that adds up pretty quickly. So between tomatoes, peppers, cucumbers, you know, from the previous slides, I think we're up to like $50, $60 already off, you know, 4 or 5 plants. So then we have leafy greens. So leafy greens are going to be about $2 to $7 a pound. You know, leafy greens, you got spinach, collards, mustard greens, kale, you know, a ton of different varieties. So I just picked collard greens, right? Everyone knows what collard greens are. So one collard green plant is going to give you about 1 to 2 pounds of collard greens. So then we break it down, $3 a pound. You produce 10 pounds off of a few plants. That's $30. So Thanksgiving, holidays come up, you know, maybe you can supply the greens from your garden. So you're saving people money, you're giving them healthy food, so it works out. So next thing, I listed blueberries. So fruits are going to be more your higher value crop, more so than like tomatoes and peppers. So like for my household, we probably buy blueberries, I would say probably every single week. Like my son loves eating blueberries. He can go through a whole pack every week. So we probably should plant some blueberry plants now that I come to think of it. But so blueberries are going to run about $3 to $10 a pound. So with blueberries, one plant can produce anywhere from 5 to 25 pounds of blueberries. So there's about 200 blueberries in 1 pound. Let's price them at $6 a pound. $6 times 10 pounds of blueberries is at $60. So if you're like my household, $60 of blueberries, I mean, that could really help save us money in the long run, especially up to this point. We probably spent thousands of dollars on blueberries as much as we buy them. So overall, so the cost and the savings, it's gonna just vary based on the scale of it. So a bigger scale garden is gonna give you bigger costs versus savings. So in this picture here, you can see, you know, on the left, a tomato plant in one plot, and then on the right, you can see someone has a whole layout of different crops. So they could easily make or have a ton of cost and a ton of savings on all the crops that they're producing on that larger area. So really the savings really come in with food preservation. So y'all have been in the grocery store in the canned goods section, right? So all that is, that's food preservation. You know, you'll look on the can, it says good till 2029 or whatever, right? So they've harvested that food and they've packaged it and prepared it in a way that it'll last longer, even though they've already harvested it. So you can see here they have canned fruits, and then they also have pickled items. So canned goods, pickled items, freezing it. Like for example, I like spicy peppers. My favorite pepper is habanero. So at my house in my freezer, I think I have like 3 bags of frozen habaneros that I produced like 2 or 3 years ago. So I produced so much that I'm not gonna eat all those habaneros obviously, but I produced so much, I was able to freeze those, and then I just have those for when I want to use them. So this was a really cool story that I learned about in Genesis 41. So basically, the Pharaoh of Egypt had this dream, and he was saying the dream involved like cattle and corn. He was saying he dreamed about healthy cattle and cattle that didn't look so good, and he dreamed about healthy corn and corn that didn't look so good. So it was like 7 healthy cattle, 7 unhealthy cattle, 7 healthy ears of corn, 7 unhealthy ears of corn. So he had this dream, and he was basically like, it troubled him. The scripture says that he felt troubled after. So he started searching through Egypt for people to interpret the dream. He was like calling on like wise men and magicians, like, tell me what this dream means. So then he ended up asking Joseph, and Joseph basically said, God was showing you that there's going to be 7 years of abundance in Egypt. Then there's going to be 7 years of famine. And then once he told him that, he basically made Joseph in charge of making sure they were producing enough food during these abundance years. So they produced a lot of corn, a lot of grain. So in these 7 years, I believe it said like with the corn or the grain, it was like sand from the ocean. Like it was so much they were producing, they lost count of it. So they had the 7 years of abundance, then the 7 years of famine hit. Once that famine hit, of course, people were panicking. We're going to think in Bible time, but if you think about that now, if Walmart and Kroger was like, we're going to close for 7 years, what would y'all do? All of them said, we're going to take a break. We're going to close. People would, it'd be crazy, right? So basically what ended up happening during the famine, since they were prepared, he was selling this food from the storehouses to all the people of Egypt. So that was just, and if you read that whole chapter, you'll see what I'm talking about. But that was just a really good kind of connection showing, like, you don't need to be, scared. Just like do small things to prepare yourself, just in case. So with food preservation, there's a lot of different ways that you can do it. So there's freezing, drying, canning, pickling. And the University of Georgia has this really good resource. It's called So Easy to Preserve. And it's a book that teaches you how to preserve your own food. So it's based on, their research from their faculty. So you can trust the information out of it. And we have a QR code for the book if you all want to scan it. And then if you want to purchase this book, you can definitely do that to kind of learn some different techniques for how to do that on your own. And I'll give y'all a minute to scan that. All right, y'all got it? Okay, so y'all bringing in canned goods in about a month or two so we can see if you followed up on this assignment. Possibly, maybe. Oh, so a plug. So the church has their own food pantry. So the food pantry has freeze-dried foods. It has different canned goods. So if you need assistance in that area, just reach out to administration and they can provide that resource to you. So for the finance piece and summary, so the first one I have here is have a plan. So again, I'm not telling you spend $1,000 on food or panic. Just, maybe set aside $10 a month to get some canned goods. You set aside $100 in the springtime to buy some plants. So just make some type of plan, you and your family, to get started. And then this is really important. So, if you don't eat tomatoes and peppers, I wouldn't necessarily encourage you to grow those, but you should select vegetables and fruits you actually eat. So that's when you're going to see those savings. And that's how you're going to get the benefit from that. And then I would say scale up slowly. So especially for people who are new to gardening, being outside, things of that nature, you want to build up your foundation of gardening slowly. And then, like we just talked about with the food preservation piece, that's really where you're going to see the savings at, because, 1 year you may get a ton of tomatoes. The second year, maybe the landscaper destroys your plants. There's a freeze, something like that. Then you don't get as much. So whenever you get good production out of that year, make sure you set some aside for the next year. And then finally, I listed time versus labor and the benefits. So, of course, it's hard to capture the cost of your time and labor, right? Because, if your job pays you $100 an hour, I'm not going to say, you should account for spending 4 hours in the garden so you lost $400. That's kind of hard to think about. But the benefits of vegetable gardening, they're going to include, you're outside, you're doing physical activity, you're doing something that doesn't involve like a screen. It's good for you physically, mentally. You're growing healthy food for your family. So there's a lot of benefits that you can't really quantify in this situation. So now on to the practical side of how do you actually start doing this. So like real estate, location is the number one thing you should think about. So in this picture, we have a garden. You can see half of the garden is shaded and the other half is sunny. So next time you go to the store, you'll see this word full sun on a lot of the different flowers. So full sun means 6 to 8 hours of sunlight. So a lot of fruits and vegetables need 6 to 8 hours of sunlight. So if your backyard is really shady and it only gets 1 hour, you can start a garden, but is it going to be successful? Probably not. So you need to find a very sunny spot in your yard, on your porch, on your balcony, so that you can start growing fruits and vegetables. So the second thing is going to be kind of the method of how you're going to plant. So this picture shows the in-ground version. So me personally, I have raised beds. So we live in Georgia, so we got this hard red clay that's pretty much like cement. So if you want to tackle that, you definitely can. I said, I'm not doing that. I have raised beds with easy soil that you can dig into, but growing in the ground is generally going to be less expensive, because if you have a backyard, you have open ground, if you have a shovel or a tiller, the cost to actually get in the ground is going to be low versus buying pots and things like that. So you're also going to do less watering. So since the plants are in the ground, they have access to more soil, the roots have more space, they have more access to get water more easily versus raised beds or pots that heat up quicker and they lose water quicker. And then this is also going to be more maintenance. So that's another reason why I went with the raised beds, because I don't really, want to worry too much about pulling weeds or clearing weeds out the garden. So with the raised beds, you can see here, these are metal. So with raised beds, I recommend getting metal raised beds, because the metal is going to last longer than the wood or the plastic. So the plastic is going to last for a few years, maybe, depending on what materials are. But plastic can, of course, break. It can start to bend. It's going to start to deteriorate in that weather. And usually metal is, just more durable material, but it's also going to be more expensive. But also with the raised beds, it's just easier to manage, taking care of those plants. And also with the raised beds, you can get raised beds like even higher than that. So for people, who have back problems or people who are disabled, you can get raised beds that are, as high as you want them to be. So then it's easier for you to access and move around with the plants and things like that. So then we have containers. So containers are going to be a lower cost solution. So containers, of course, are going to be cheaper. They're also going to be portable, more flexibility, because you can just move containers around, especially if you're trying to grow something that doesn't like cold, or you think, you need to move it somewhere else. If it's in a container, you can do that. But, with the containers, you're going to have less space and generally less production versus, a large in-ground area or a raised bed area. And then Another really cool, I guess to me, interesting way to grow food is going to be through hydroponics. So with hydroponics, this is actually where the agricultural industry is moving, is towards, this is called controlled environment agriculture or indoor farming. So a lot of people are moving towards this because growing food with hydroponics, you can grow it faster. The pest control or the pest pressure isn't the same because you're inside of a building, so you're not, warring against nature as far as bugs and disease and all that stuff. So what you see in the picture here, these are hydroponic towers, and there's a ton of different companies that sell these towers. So the towers, of course, compared to the other things that I talked about, these are going to be a lot more expensive than getting a raised bed. So how these basically work is they're also going to require power because they use special lights to simulate sunlight. And that's what the plants need to be successful. And then there's no soil in hydroponics, so there's just plant roots, and the plant roots are constantly in a liquid water solution with nutrients in it. So, so the plants are going to be basically supplied by these nutrients, and that's how they grow a lot faster. So there's no soil, there's no digging, you don't have to go outside. So this could be an option for you, but it's also going to be the most expensive option. So another consideration for growing your own food is going to be water. And with this, kind of the, I guess, ongoing theme I want to, I guess, inform you all about is you want this to be as convenient for you as possible. Because, as you know, if something is convenient for us, we're more likely to do it, right? So you don't want to plant your garden, a 5-minute walk away from your house. You want your garden like right there by your back door. And same with the water. You want your water to be close to your garden. You don't want to fill up water tanks and have to walk them everywhere versus a hose that you can just pull out and water your garden, right? And what's really interesting about water, so water is probably the second most important thing other than soil, and rainwater is really going to help the productivity of your garden. And the thing with rainwater is free, right? So city water, you got to pay for that. But rainwater, this is a free resource for you to use to water your garden. So they have things called rain barrels. And that's what this picture is. If you see this blue barrel, this is just a rain barrel. So it's just a freestanding plastic barrel. So when it rains enough, it starts collecting that water. And then you can water your plants when we're in a drought, when we don't have rain, versus paying for the water that comes to your house. And I listed here water runoff from a roof. So when you're dealing with food crops, you don't want to use water runoff from your regular like shingle roof, because there's a lot of chemicals and things from the shingles. There's like animal waste on your roof. So there's a bunch of different things you don't want on your food crops. Now, if you got a rain barrel that's connected to your gutter system from your roof, you can, of course, use that on your flowers. So it's best to get a freestanding rain barrel if you want to use that on your food crops. And the types of roofs that they recommend to use with a rain barrel is a metal roof. Like if y'all have seen those, like it's probably aluminum, flat aluminum roofs. Those are the best to use for roof runoff water if you want to use for your food crops. All right, so the next, this might be the most important one. So labor. So if we look in Luke 10:2, so therefore said he unto them, the harvest truly is great, but the laborers are few. Pray ye therefore the Lord of the harvest that he would send forth laborers into his harvest. So here, Jesus was talking about, people in ministry, right? So just like at church, there's a ton to do in the kingdom. There's a ton of things to do in the kingdom of God, but of course there's not as many laborers as there should be. So this is going to be the same thing with the garden. So if you look at that first slide of my presentation, all that produce looks great, right? When you go in Publix, I like Publix to get produce from. All the produce in there looks great. This is like the most popular part of vegetable gardening. People love to see that, right? But what does it take to get that though? This is a great picture, but someone had to, you know, dig in the soil. They had to buy the plants. They had to go out there when it was hot, go out there when it was cold. Because I mean, we don't really want to think about that. We just want to think about this great food we're about to eat. And I meant to put like pictures up, because like a lot of companies put pictures up by gardens where, you know, the work is done, but what led up to that point of how that produce was made. So that's important. So if you're going to start this, you need to make sure that you have some help. So it's best, you know, if you're by yourself, of course, you may be able to do it to an extent, but the more help you have, the easier it's going to be. And producing successful vegetable garden takes a lot, like lifting, watering, planting, monitoring for pests, digging in the ground. Harvesting, of course, is the fun and great part, but remember, you know, there's more to it than just reaping the harvest. So then I'll put this ahead of water, so soil. So soil is going to be like the foundation of everything if you're planting, you know, in the ground, in raised beds. So soil provides nutrients, water, protection to the plants. If you have healthy soil, most likely you're going to have healthy plants. So just like our bodies, you know, if you put in healthy stuff into your body, you know, most likely you're going to be healthy, right? So with soil, there's a lot of different things you can do to improve it. So those things are mainly going to be fertilizer, and they're going to be organic matter. So with fertilizer, we have a picture here of some organic fertilizer, and they usually put 3 numbers on it, and those numbers are going to refer to nutrients. So it's going to be nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. Those are like the 3 core nutrients that plants need to grow. So you always want to look at that ratio to see what that is. And then organic matter is going to be things like compost, leaves, things in the natural environment that help build the soil up. And then talking about leaves, so how many of you all like bag your leaves up and throw them away? Does anyone do that? Or do you see your neighbors do that? Yep. So what you're doing is you're really throwing away gold. So leaves are natural fertilizer for plants. So we really shouldn't be throwing these away or putting them in the landfill, because if you ever, next time you walk through a park or a natural area, maybe in the fall, there's a bunch of leaves on the ground. If you scrape those leaves back, there's always like a rich black layer right under those leaves, because trees drop their leaves, and you may think, you know, they're just doing that because it's changing the seasons. What they're really doing is they're dropping all that stored energy, and they're making deposits back into themselves and back into the plants and environment around it. So leaves are going to be, you know, full of nutrients for your crops. And then, so now that we have the soil, the water, the location, of course, you know, we all love to eat, but there's a ton of stuff outside that loves to eat the same stuff we like to eat. So we have our next topic, which is going to be pest control protection. So I put 1 Peter 5:8, so be sober, be vigilant, because your adversary, the devil, as a roaring lion, walketh about, seeking whom he may devour. So I'm not saying the devil is going to be in your garden, but all these different things outside are going to be fighting against you so that you're not successful in this, right? And in this scripture, vigilant means to watch, give strict attention to. So that means don't say you're going to start a vegetable garden and then you're going on, you know, a cruise for a month. Like, you have to monitor this thing, right? You got to watch it. Or when you come back, you might not have any vegetables. So this is back to the organic piece. So the most important part of pest control is going to be something called IPM, which is integrated pest management. So with this system, you prioritize doing many things before spraying chemicals on your crops. So that could be things like making sure the plants that you buy don't have pests on them already, making sure you're rotating your crops, making sure if you see a bug that looks odd on your vegetables, that you find out what it is and then you remove it immediately. So regular monitoring and prevention is going to be key. So it's easier to prevent a problem than to treat a problem, basically. So I know we're in DeKalb County, but I know, there's still deer and rabbits and other animals, around the city. So I used to work in South Georgia, and I heard a lot of like crazy concoctions, hot sauce and eggs and all that. I mean, if a deer is hungry, it's gonna eat the stuff. So that I wouldn't rely on any repellents. The best thing for that is to get a fence. So at least 8 feet. I mean, a fence is like your foolproof way to keep deers or rabbits, things like that, out of your crop. So physical barriers. And then insects are going to be a little different. So with insects, it's best to constantly inspect things that you bring into your garden. Also identify damage. So like this is a caterpillar that's eating a leaf. So you can see that hole it made. So that's a sign that a chewing insect is on your crop somewhere. So that's not going to be a deer. Like a deer is not going to chew a circle on the inside of your leaf. They're just going to eat the whole plant, right? So there's different indicators that you can use. So then it's also important to distinguish between good and bad bugs. How many people don't like bugs? Okay, like the whole sanctuary. Okay, so despite what y'all believe, there are good bugs and bad bugs. And then, of course, as a reminder, everything that's on earth has some type of purpose, even though we don't like them. So this is why I say it's also good to use the natural environment. So there is a way to attract good bugs to your garden. So this is a ladybug. So, well, there's a ladybug, like bees, wasps, different pollinating insects. So there's a ton of different insects that you can attract to your garden that benefit it. So you can attract those by planting flowers, planting herbs, planting a variety of crops, and then most importantly, avoid spraying pesticides unless you absolutely have to, because pesticides, similar, so pesticides, you can spray them, but they're not getting sprayed on your crop and then they're jumping off bugs that are good, right? They're just going to kill whatever they touch. So it's good to avoid those. So this is for my people who don't like bugs. So this picture is so cool to me. This is a story with it. So we got Romans 1:20. Well, we'll go after that. We'll go at that after. So this caterpillar is called a tomato hornworm. So the white sacs on his back are actually parasitic wasp eggs. So this tomato hornworm is a common tomato pest. So it'll, destroy your tomato plant. But the white sacs on the back are baby wasps. And basically what they're going to do, they're going to eat the hornworm alive, basically, and kill it. And then they're going to grow up and mature and then do the same thing to more hornworms. So this is called a natural defense against pests. So if you have tomato plants and you see this tomato hornworm and you see it has white sacs on the back, then you should not kill it, because this is like natural and you're like in disbelief right now. So this is like natural pest control for tomato crops. So the reason I put Romans 1:20 up, it says, "For the invisible things of him from the creation of the world are clearly seen, being understood by the things that are made, even his eternal power and Godhead, so that they are without excuse." So looking at that, that's not random, right? So that's not just, they just happen to know that these things are designed to find these tomato hornworms and do exactly this, destroy it and continue it, benefiting gardeners everywhere, right? So this is just like an example of how he has made the earth, how he has made things, and how he shows like order and glory in the earth, right? So the next thing is going to be disease. So disease is going to be mainly like leaf discoloration. If you look at that plant, something's definitely wrong with it. So these are usually going to be caused by viruses, bacteria, wet conditions, infected plants. So again, this takes monitoring, making sure things are in order. And then we have different seasons. So, and you can post Ecclesiastes 3:1, but with different crops, each crop has different seasons. So I posted the 4 seasons here, but there's a season that you should plant certain things. So tomatoes would be a warm season crop. Collard greens would be a cool season crop, meaning when we have cooler weather in the fall and spring, that's the time to plant leafy greens. When it's hot in June and July, that's the time to plant tomatoes, peppers, things like that. And then the University of Georgia has this really cool vegetable planting chart, and it'll give you the crop. It'll tell you, the planting dates, when's the best time to plant them, and then it'll also tell you days to maturity. So days to maturity is the time it takes for a crop to reach maturity to be harvested. So we have lettuce here with the days to maturity being 50 to 90 days versus watermelon 80 to 100 days. So with the lettuce or any leafy green, you're really just waiting for the leaves to get bigger, because the leaves are what you're harvesting from that crop. So you're waiting for them to get bigger. You cut them off, eat those. Now with the watermelon, the watermelon has to grow vines, and they also have to grow these huge melons, right? So comparing the two, which one, should take longer? The watermelon, right? Because it has to use more resources to make it. And then we have, as far as getting started, so I always recommend people use plants because it's quicker, but you can use seeds. Seeds are going to be cheaper. They're going to be easier to store. They're going to have more variety, more choices, but you're going to have slower results. So with the seed, you have to plant the seed, wait for it to germinate, grow leaves, get bigger and bigger and bigger. But you also have more choices to grow different crops you want. And then with the plants, those are going to be more expensive, but you're going to get quicker results, right? So if you want food quicker, you buy a seed that's already germinated, that's already sprouted, that's already close to producing something you can harvest. But you're also going to have less variety, because if you go to the store, they're only going to have, maybe 5 or 6 tomato plants as far as the varieties. But if you want a black tomato, a yellow tomato, something different, you would choose the seeds. But in summary, if you want to be successful at growing your vegetable garden, definitely grow what you can. I recommend getting with a family member or getting with a friend. If you don't have a lot of space, but your sister or your friend does, you all can work together. Maybe you grow tomatoes, they'll grow cucumbers and peppers, something like that. And then you also want to keep costs low, so you don't have to have the most expensive hydroponic system. You don't have to have the most exclusive seeds. You just got to get the basics right and then plan that out. And then you also, again, want to make sure you're encouraging people in your community, whether that's at church, at your job, whatever, to also start growing their own food. And then, if all else fails, you want to find a local farmer. So we have a ton of awesome farmers in the metro Atlanta area who are growing food. You can ask them. So I always recommend, if you find that farmer, you can say, how do you grow your crops? What chemicals do you use? What's your philosophy for running a farm? And then, of course, you can walk up to their farm. You can see what they're doing. You can learn about, what they're about. And, that's, I would say, on the same level as you growing your own food. And then if you all have more questions after this, we have time for some questions, but I posted my email here if you want to contact me after this presentation.
Thank you, Brandon.
You got a question?
Okay, question. So how do you keep away the insects, the bad ones?
How do you keep the bad ones away? So how do you keep so the question was, how do you keep the bad insects away or the bad bugs away? So I would say you want to make sure you're doing things to to naturally attract good insects to your garden. So that would include planting things like sunflowers, zinnias, cosmos, planting different herbs like rosemary, cilantro. So all those flowers and herbs naturally attract good bugs to your garden, and then they find the bad bugs and kill them. But that may not, kill all the bugs. So you may have to do some intervention in that area along with the natural protections you've established.
Good evening. I have a similar question. I have a raised garden bed, and I neglected it. So I feel like it's like teeming right now, and I'm like, okay, do I plant garlic? Do I plant onions, or do I like start all the way over? Because I don't want to plant for the spring, knowing that this is not good soil.
So you want to delay planting until summertime?
I want to know how to remedy this particular thing. Because my solution would be to just throw away all the dirt. That's all I know to do.
Yeah, so I wouldn't throw away all the dirt. I mean, if you want to like renovate your garden, you could dig up the weeds and the old plants in there, and then you can amend the soil, meaning you can add like a fresh bag of compost to that soil, and then you can start again from there.
But if I can see the bugs, I can see them.
But bugs are always going to be there.
Okay,
You just
thank
don't want to see any bugs? Okay, you're going to send me an email with a follow-up? Okay.
Good evening. When you have your raised bed garden, how do you go about rotating your crops or whatever? Because if they're in the raised, do you keep up with what you grew in this bed and then figure out what you're gonna put in that next bed?
Yep, so great question. So with crop rotation, this goes back to planning out your garden. So if you have, we'll say you got 4 raised beds. So if this year you plant tomatoes and peppers in raised bed 1, so next year you want to move the tomatoes and peppers to raised bed 2. So you should keep like a journal. You can keep it on your phone, or you can keep a physical journal of the crops you plant and where. Because if you plant the same crops in the same place over and over again, then you allow pest pressure to build up, and then that decreases your garden yield or your garden harvest.
Are there any natural pesticides?
Yep. So natural pesticides are going to be things like neem oil, insecticidal soap, spinosad. So with back to the USDA organic label. So the USDA organic farmers, they use more or less what you would call more natural pesticides. And University of Georgia has a list of those pesticides, or if you email me, I can send those out. But those are just a few more natural ones that you can use in your garden.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, because this relates to that question.
Yep.
Now, I tried the neem oil, Brandon, but it burnt the plant. So can you talk about the timing to put the neem oil on the plant?
When did you apply the neem oil?
When the sun was out.
So that's another great example. So whenever you're applying any chemicals, I mean, it's the same thing for your house, right? Like if you got bleach in your house, you're not gonna pour it all over the floor. You're gonna have to read that label, right? So the key to chemicals being successful with pest control is you gotta read the label. So whatever the label tells you to do, and I believe with neem oil it says don't apply it when it's like 90 degrees outside, or to burn it, something like that. So when you're applying pesticides, make sure you follow the label. And the main thing you need to watch out for is making sure the chemical you're using is labeled to be used on food crops. So like bleach, for example, no one should be putting bleach on tomatoes. That's not what it's for, but if you have a product like insecticidal soap and it says you can put it on vegetable crops, of course, follow the label.
Okay, I want to use seeds to grow. I want to start learning how to do it from that point. Now, what I did was I used the seeds and then I used the light. And then they came to be long and real thin like, right? But if I'm going to use the seeds to start planting, say, tomatoes for the next coming up in March, I think we're supposed to be doing March, right? What's the best time I should have started with those seeds and why that came up long like that? All those good things, please.
Yeah, so with seed starting, you usually start that 8 weeks before the last frost. So really so we have that chart that UGA has, the planting chart. They'll give you the dates, but really you need to look and see, you really need to watch the weather and see when the last frost will be typically for your area. So right now we're in February. The stores may have tomatoes out, but it's still too early to plant those out. But typically with seeds, you want to start doing those about 8 weeks before the last frost. Now, as far as the seedlings being really leggy or really long, so that could be due to different factors like how much sun they're getting. Are you overwatering? Are you underwatering? What type of nutrient mix are they growing out of? But back to UGA again, they have a really good seed starting publication that you can get that gives you like a step-by-step way to make sure your seedlings are growing in a healthy manner so that you can just eventually take those out and put them in your garden outside. Yeah.
Good evening. So talking about the overwatering, underwatering, so do you actually measure the water and also how do you know what's actually wrong with the plant if it's dying and you don't know what it is? If it's too much sun, not enough sun, too much water, not enough water, like how do you know?
Good question. So plants are pretty similar to people. So just like when we're not feeling well, we have a fever, we want to sleep, whatever. So there's usually indicators. So with plants, so if leaves are supposed to be green and they look yellow, or there's a hole in them, or there's spots on them, all those are different indicators that something is wrong. So with those, it's really best to research common insects, common diseases that affect those plants. So that goes back to your kind of pest management journal. As far as watering goes, so typically with vegetable crops, it's better to water less frequently and water deeply versus I'm going to water these every single day. Because as far as watering goes, a good way to measure if plants are getting enough is feeling the soil. So you can stick your hand into the soil to see if it's still moist or it's still wet, because that's an indicator that water is infiltrating down into the soil and the roots are getting that water. But with vegetable gardens, you don't need to water every single day. And then plants will also give you signs on if they need more water or less water.
So I started a garden, but I used wood instead of metal. I got busy, so I kind of just stopped. But then I also realized like there wasn't enough sunlight where I was doing the garden.
Yeah.
I have two questions for that one. So you said like if there's not enough sunlight, find some. If I don't have it, is it healthy to transport, the soil and stuff that I have? Because I did the compost, the soil, the leaves, the everything to it. Is it okay to up and move it elsewhere, or should I start over?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So yeah, if you started a garden in a place that doesn't get enough sunlight and then you found another more suitable location, you can definitely just move that soil. You can put it in a bag, you can put it in a wheelbarrow, put it in, plastic buckets and move that soil and put it in a new area.
Okay, my next question is how do you feel about using compost other than buying it for the store? Like in DeKalb County, they have places where you can go and get compost. I also use like fruit peels and like things like that. How do you feel about using those different things for compost?
Yep. So another great question. So composting, so that could be a whole nother class in itself, but you can compost the food waste at your house. So compost is basically going to be browns, greens, air, and water. So browns are going to be things like leaves. So that's going to be your carbon source, or paper or wood products. And then greens are going to be your nitrogen sources. So just like you said, orange peels, banana peels, old watermelon, pineapple, whatever. So once you combine those things together with air and water, eventually it turns into that rich black compost. So if you want to compost at home, you definitely can do that. But yeah, DeKalb County does offer free compost. I think it's by the landfill or something like that, right?
Yeah,
Yep.
they got a few places like all
Yep.
over Metro. I mean, over DeKalb. Like,
Yep.
So different spots in your city, whichever.
Yep. So if you have some place that uses free compost, that's definitely a good resource. So what I tell people, if you want to look for quality compost, you want it to be like a rich dark color, like almost black. So that's a sign that has a lot of organic matter in it. It's going to be high quality.
All right, thank you.
Okay, so thoughts about covering your bed or soil with pine chips and pine straws. Didn't we use that? Does that help for certain seasons? Because I don't think it helped us this time.
So the thing about pine straw, so anytime you're going to cover the soil with natural things like pine straw, we'll talk about pine straw for example. So that's going to be like a natural mulch. So pine straw, and you see it in people's yards around their flowers. So that mulch layer is going to help lock in the moisture. It's going to help with weed control. It's going to help lock everything in to help your plants. But pine straw doesn't really break down into the soil that well. So leaves is what I would recommend, especially if you have a lawnmower with a bag. So when the fall time comes, you could chop those leaves up, and then all those chopped up leaves in the bag, you can spread that out across your garden beds, and that would be a natural mulch. But leaves are going to break down a lot quicker and faster than pine needles are. You can use wood chips, but the thing about wood chips, you're talking about like free wood chips, like what they get from the side of the road, from like telephone poles and stuff. Oh, like wood chip mulch. Yeah, so I wouldn't necessarily use that mulch on vegetable gardens because it's usually like dyed black or red, because it's like a lot of chemicals in it. That's mainly for like ornamental use. So that's fine for your roses and your flowers or whatever. But for your food crops, you want to use something like leaves. You can use newspaper. You can use cardboard, like things that will naturally break down and don't have all those chemicals in it.
Okay, we have a question from Chris online. They're asking, do you have suggestions for the setup of what should or shouldn't you plant together? Also, would you recommend using lime around raised beds to deter pests?
Using lime? Yep, so lime isn't a pest control solution. So basically what lime does, it changes the pH of the soil. So like water, we're going back to science class. So water has a pH of 7. So 7 is neutral. So what lime does, lime increases the pH. So with vegetables, generally speaking, they like a neutral pH. But blueberries, they like a more acidic pH around like 4 to 5. So in that situation, you use sulfur to lower the pH. And then what was the other part of the question?
What should or shouldn't you plant together?
Yep. So what he's asking about is companion planting. So generally speaking, you can plant things together that are in season. So warm season crops, for example, if you want to do tomatoes, peppers, and cucumbers, you can definitely plant those together. And for companion planting for those type of plants would be things like basil, marigolds, flowers, some of those natural things I talked about that attract good bugs. Now, things you shouldn't plant together. So I would say with that, it'd be good to think about like sunlight. So have y'all seen like okra plants? Okra gets super tall, so you wouldn't want to plant, a bunch of okra plants and then plant a small, what would we say, like a smaller maybe cucumber plant that gets shaded out by the okra. So in that situation, the okra may decrease the sunlight the other plants get behind it, and then you wouldn't want to plant it that way. So there's a lot of, I guess, different factors you can think about with that.
Hi, I have two questions. You mentioned good compost. I discovered recently that the landfill has free compost. So, do you have any thoughts on what do you mean by good compost?
Yeah, so when I say good compost, so good compost is really going to have, well, depending on what you use, because I think with the cab, I think they use just a lot of tree branches, and I'm not sure what else. But like we'll say, like there's a company called Supersod that makes something called the Big Yellow Bag, which is a huge bag of compost. And that compost is really, has a dark color to it, has an earthy smell. There's not a lot of chunks to it. So typically that's how you want your compost to look, is a dark black color. And you don't want a lot of things that aren't broken down in it.
Okay. And the other question is, how far-reaching is your contact information? I mean, it's just like from this session, a few questions, or the reason I ask is I find it difficult to research because you start to get all kinds of information. Yeah. And sometimes I often wish, can I just send a picture to somebody? Because a picture is worth 1,000 words as to what's causing this to do this. Are you open to that?
Yep. So I was going to say you can definitely email me, but generally speaking, so again, back to University of Georgia. So University of Georgia, they have something called extension offices. So they have an extension office in every county in Georgia, and they have people called agriculture agents. So I used to be one of those. That's why I'm constantly referencing them. But so each county has agriculture agents or agriculture staff where you can get your soil tested. You can see, what's in it. They can test your water. They can identify pests for you. You can send them pictures. They can come out and do site visits. They can help you plan your garden. They can recommend crops to grow. So on the local level, that is your source, but you can still, email me if you have questions.
That's very helpful. Thank you.
Yeah.
Hello, Brandon.
How you doing?
I was gonna say, can you expound more on fertilizers? You talked about the codes on the back of the fertilizers, but can you expound more on that? You just mentioned soil testing. That's what I was gonna say, because maybe somebody is buying too much based on the numbers. It may be too much phosphorus or too much nitrogen, and so how can they gauge what to use in their garden and in their landscape?
Yep. So with fertilizer, you definitely can overdo fertilizer. So 10-10-10 is a really common one, especially for like turf grass. So you got synthetic fertilizers, then you got more natural fertilizers. So so really you can go overboard with either one. So for you to know how much fertilizer you need to apply, especially in the garden, on the label of that product, it'll say, for 100 square feet, apply 2 cups to this area, and then reapply after 6 weeks or whatever. So with that, it's best to look at the label to see how much fertilizer that you need to apply to, vegetable crops.
So, I went to the doctor because I've always had like reactions to watermelon and bananas and pineapples. I still eat them, but when I went to get tested again as an adult, my doctor says that I'm not allergic to the fruit. I'm allergic to what is grown with. So is there a certain type of fertilizer or pesticide or anything that you know of that is used on these fruits that I could be aware of, like not using, because I would like to grow them, but every time I eat them, I'm having a reaction. Like my mouth is bumping up, or itchy throat. I even had an incident on a plane to Kenya with walnuts. I don't even know if it was the walnuts, but I did get tested when I got home, and they said that it wasn't a walnut. So I'm like kind of confused on like, is it something that I need to stay away from? Because she couldn't like pinpoint it, but is there something like exact as being planted with these different plants that maybe I should stay away from?
Yeah, so this goes back to finding your local farmer, right? So, the food that's in the store, we don't know the story behind it. You go to Kroger and get a watermelon, I don't know if it came from Georgia or California or wherever. So you don't know the story unless either you grew it yourself or you find a local farmer. But I mean, there's a ton of different chemicals that are applied to food, pesticides, fertilizers. Maybe there was a chemical in the truck that was transporting the food. So that really just goes back to the importance of like shortening that connection between, where our food comes from. Like the closer it is, the better eye you can kind of keep on it. So.
All right, thank you.
All right, do we have any more questions? All right, again, my email is posted. Again, appreciate the opportunity. If y'all have any questions, let me know.
Thank you for joining us today. We love that you've entrusted us to be a part of your spiritual growth. Be sure to check the links in the description to learn more about salvation, planting, and ways to give. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our podcast and YouTube channel. Join the conversation and stay connected using #TheHandOfTheLordChurch. We'd love for you to be a part of what God is doing here, so check out thehand.us/events for upcoming gatherings and opportunities to fellowship. We pray the word has ministered to your heart and inspired you to expand God's kingdom. Until next time, according to 3 John verse 2, Beloved, I wish above all things that thou mayest prosper, be in good health, even as thy soul prospers. In Jesus' name, amen.